came from Christchurch with Billy, my first husband, my only husband, now ex-husband, who also lives on this property. We came over here and when our oldest child was a baby, and lived with Bill Hartley and some other people in the house that Nikki and Kirk now own, which John Allen and his first wife used to live in. And we lived there for a while, and then when Bill and Co sold the house to John and Jenny, we kind of had to move out. But there was a little batch on the property, so we moved into there. And John wasn't kind of expecting to have a couple of hippies living on his property, but he coped with it fairly well. And we learned a lot while we were living there about milking goats and gardening and what have you, and raising babies, and we didn't have any electricity, and used to wash the nappies in a concrete tub with a wringer outside. I can't even imagine it now, but, you know, when you're young you can do these things. When Billy came along, he was such a happy-go-lucky guy, he really was, and I just felt happy when I was with him, and that's one of the big reasons why we got together. And I'm really proud of my relationship with Billy, because we were actually good together. We hit upon the rocks of all sorts of things that you hit upon when you're young and you get married and you really have no idea what you're doing, especially when things are tough. But I'm really proud of the two girls that we've raised, and they're both doing really well. Yeah, I met all sorts of people who came to live here or since moved on, and got friends with the people in the farm here on the commune, and eventually were invited to move here, and we did. Well, being isolated and remote basically just throws you back on yourself. You're all you've got, or your friends, or your family, and you pull together and you pull your resources and you pull out whatever you've got out of the hat to make it work. And it makes you incredibly self-reliant, you know. We both lived in the Ross's dome house, which burnt down a few years later in 1991, I think it was, and lived here and there, and didn't really have anywhere to live, so at that stage you could get the family benefit and you could cash it in and have a deposit on the house. So me and the two girls bought a house in Rananga, and I never really cottoned to living in Rananga. I couldn't quite hack the coal smoke for one thing, and the people, how the houses were all so close, and suburban living isn't for me. I finally found out. But anyways, this little place came up for sale and I jumped at it, and I moved in 1988. So I don't know if you can see up there, but there's if you turn your head this way, you can see a name written along that rafter, and it's R. Hazelhurst, and that was the builder of the house, and it was the first thing he had ever built, and it was built out of recycled materials and demolition materials and some home milled wood from the pine trees that were just up the back there, and the whole thing cost $2,000, and this was, I think, in 1975 or something like that. Yeah. I had to move up to Nelson because my father became very incapacitated, and I moved up to look after him, and ended up working and living up there, and met Warren, and lived up there for over 20 years, and then moved back here when I reached my retirement, because I wanted to give the house a bit of loving care, which is starting to really get run down, and especially the environs. You know, if you go away and leave a house over here unattended, you come back and you're lucky if you can find it. There would be blackberries over the roof. So it's taken me a while, but then I've had a lot of help, but I've bashed out the area and made it look a lot tidier, and been working on the house, but I've kind of given up on ever making this house nice. I mean, it started out as a shed and it's never really much evolved from that. People love it though, because it's so cute looking and because it's in such a magic spot. Really, it's got the $1 million view. I've always been a bit artistic, I guess, so this is what really attracted me to living around here, because it's just so beautiful and inspiring. And I used to paint. When we first lived here, my girls used to play with Bonnie. That's who else was here, Bob Code and Sandra and his family. With Bonnie was a year younger than Ruby, and there was Miffy and Bryony from the house up the road, John Allen and Jenny's children. And there were a whole bunch of kids. I remember the birthday parties used to be phenomenal, you know, just huge hordes of kids tramping icing all over the floor. But they kind of liked living here. When they were younger it was easier, and they were happy with, you know, dogs and horses and running around on the beach. And when they're in the teenage years they want their friends a little bit more, so it became more difficult. You know, when I was young, what I saw myself doing was living in a cute little house, maybe in the forest or maybe by the sea, and doing art and having people come and visit me. And that's what I'm doing. So I guess I've ended up with what I wanted. There's always things that you wish you'd done differently, but in the end you can't have done them differently, because you were the person that you were and you did the best you could with what you had at the time. And I don't have any regrets. I've been through some incredible experiences, good and bad, and these are what make up a life, and it's incredibly rich and varied, and I'm very contented to sit on my deck and contemplate my life. Well, you know, we're all just getting on with our lives and trying to live as lightly on the earth as we can and grow our own food, and you know, and I've got the bees here, which I really love. I'm really enjoying getting to know them and be an apprentice beekeeper. We used to try and be self-sufficient, you know, in the old days of Sparama and, you know, the farm. There was the cow and there were goats, and there was the Sparama had the draft horses he made his driveway with, and you know, and pigs, all of those things, and there were sheep running mad up in the hill. I think the people that live here now, we've kind of got so used to one another, it's kind of like putting on an old pair of shoes. You know what I mean? We accept one another. We're over all the bumps and grinds. If I had had my wits about me when I went to uni, I would have done more literature and more philosophy, because that's really where my interests lie. I didn't know it then. And also languages, and you can do things with languages. So if I could have had my time again, I wouldn't have wasted it. I would have really studied and known what I was studying for. For me, life is about being who you are and just seeing what turns up and dealing with it. Simple, isn't it?